What have been some of your lessons? You've had now 3 co-founders over time, about different co-founder dynamics and what's important to ask in those early stages and how to work out if someone's the right fit, but also how to build a relationship. Because like, I'm not always easy to work with. And so actually, I think it's important to be like, how do you manage that relationship actively? And I see it like a romantic relationship where you've got to have the chemistry, but you've also got to put in the work. Otherwise, the honeymoon
Yeah.
period will end.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess another way to look at that is it's a partnership. Like you're going to have good days, bad days. Some days you're going to turn up very grumpy like you yesterday, other days. And I think the ability, I guess like in partnerships, I think the ability to understand each other and be able to do what needs to be done for the other one. Like there needs to be a bit of self-awareness, but also selfless in there, beingness in there, in the sense you need to be able to adapt to each other and give each other a break. I think I definitely see co-founder partnerships where there's just not necessarily an empathy or like a willingness to truly acknowledge and collaborate. It kind of can end up in this zero-sum kind of mindset. And I think, we all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have blind spots. And I think it's not about trying to find someone who doesn't have those things. It's about having someone who knows they do and is actually willing to take feedback or is willing to be able to be, kind of challenged, I guess, occasionally. And I think certainly I find something very valuable in how we work is I always know if I say something to you that you'll actually listen to me. It doesn't mean you'll agree with me. And I think that to me, I'm guessing for both of us, but I can't speak for you, is that it means that it doesn't become like a very high stress kind of working relationship. Like there's not this kind of, I don't feel like I need to tiptoe around you. And that's not because you're a pushover, because you're absolutely not. It's just, I know I don't have to push hard for you to listen. And I think that's what makes a massive difference. Like it means we can spend our time and energy on stuff that is actually generative and value add. And that it's a very people business that we do as well. We meet a lot of founders, a lot of angels, and we can actually spend our emotional intelligence and our energy not spending 50% of it looking over our shoulder going, am I going to get ambushed? Am I going to get surprised? There's that integrity, but also that effective communication that I think is super, super important.
And I think it's really helpful. I think the process of becoming a co-founder has actually made me much more self-aware because I'm aware of the things that I need to flag to you. Like I have a habit and it's fine with clients, but actually in a co-founder relationship, it is different where I, on the fly, will talk with great confidence about whatever I'm saying. And to lots of people, it would sound like I had done the thinking in advance. Most of the time I would say that's not true. Like I'm just very extrovert. I like thinking on my feet, but actually that does mean for me, most of my ideas are passionately held, but lightly. And actually, I'm very happy to then be told, you've not thought about it from this perspective. And I think I'm still worried that we've never had a fight, but actually we've been co-founders for a year now. So I'm starting to trust we're not just in a honeymoon period, like maybe we actually just have some good ways of working. But actually to that point, I often wonder, I think there's a personal dynamic. I think you being a coach really helps. But I also do wonder, the way we've chosen to build IfWeRaise is very deliberately bootstrapped. And we both have other gigs that pay us some income that mean that actually, when we come together to work, we can be very deliberate about how we work. And we're both like, it has to be enjoyable, it has to deliver on the impact, and money to a degree in IfWeRaise is secondary. And people often are like, how do you guys make money? And I'm like, don't worry, Tim and I don't yet from IfWeRaise. But actually, we want to because we want it to be a sustainable business we can both keep pouring into. But I think from my side, that has made a massive difference. And I think often when I see founders acting really badly, it's towards their co-founders. It's this degree of psychological stress of that kind of base level of Maslow's hierarchy of like your secure needs aren't being met. And so it's easier to be frustrated with the other person or feel like they're not doing enough or.
And I think you've touched on a really important point that has wider relevance, because that life and business design question. And I think Andy Aim had a concept he was sharing with about, if I'm going to start a new business and I don't have huge personal financial resources, like what's my personal runway? What can I set myself up with, perhaps saving while I'm in a job that's my 6-month period to get myself off the ground? And I think really thinking through, you could have caring responsibilities, you could have financial stresses, you could have all of these different things. Fundraising is a super stressful, unpredictable kind of activity. And I definitely see and try and support founders with kind of making thoughtful choices that set themselves up to be able to have all of the good opportunities and minimize the amount of kind of hard stress. So if you're putting yourself into this, we've got like a really short kind of do or die runway where we've got to make all of these sales within 2 weeks. Otherwise, I'm going to have, or within 2 months, whatever the kind of situation is in that early stage company. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go back to my job or I can't pay my mortgage. I'm like, sometimes life is difficult and you really can't avoid some very kind of high pressured scenarios. But I think a lot of the time, in my experience of entrepreneurship and being a founder, everything has taken 10 times longer and been 10 times slower, but actually being able to stick with stuff has set the foundations for much bigger things later. Like, I don't, in reality, there's a phrase about it takes 10 years to build a great company. I think that's actually probably true. And I think we've been lucky, partly through circumstance and partly just not putting pressure on it, that by having side hustles, we've been able to be thoughtfully and carefully, and particularly given the domain we work in, we also haven't really been forced through necessity to go, we need to monetize really hard. Because I think depending on where you're operating, it either can just make you kind of just grabby kind of commercial decisions or not give time to really bed in and experiment with them. And I've definitely seen that in my previous companies where it's just sometimes taken longer than we thought. And actually we were looking for really quick and early validation. Like, can we sell? And I think lean startup can be a bit guilty for that sometimes, of running very early validation experiments as if they're definitive, and it can hide some of those other dimensions of brand or trust or kind of just how well developed your product is or how quickly people make decisions. And I think we've been really lucky to be able to it's a huge and complex problem space we're focused on. And for me, it's super motivating that every week we can say, actually, what's going to create kind of long-term value in the right way, and not had this, or if you don't make some money by the end of the week, you're not going to be able to pay the bills.
And I think there's also a trust element, right? Because I think there have been times where that way of building has been really frustrating for me, not because of the dynamic with us, but because I've wanted to spend more time on IfWeRaise, and I've had weeks of delivery on other things which have brought in the money, but haven't moved me as much personally. So I think the other thing we both wanted to touch on is some of the challenges of building Bootstrap in the way we are, which is emotionally, when you're building a company, you just want to give it everything you've got. And actually, sometimes there have been weeks where I've been messaging you, and I think the co-founder dynamic becomes really important here, because you need someone who can say to you, I think you've literally sent me messages being like, I've been like, I'm so sorry, I'm so focused on guestworks this week, which is my kind of training consultancy business. And you've said, yeah, how dare you make a living and actually
So you pay the mortgage.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really helped me. And I think like one of our good currencies is humor. That works so well for both of us to actually make serious comments, but enjoyably. And so I think for founders who are going through it, there is this frustration of it can feel slower than you want. And you often talk about this idea of like, actually, sometimes you might have to pivot the kind of revenue you go after.
Yeah, I think raising investment can often frame companies in terms of what's the most scalable, largest global kind of thing that we can do. But actually, that's often the end state rather than the beginning state. We don't have the insight, the resources, or anything else to operate in that way. And I think this is absolutely not true for all types of companies or all business models or all sectors. But I definitely see, if you're passionate about becoming a founder or really want to make an impact on a kind of problem or solution space, running the business or the company that will support you today and gets you started in that space today, that could be a service business, for example. It could be at the beginning of that kind of scalability curve. That's going to position you so much better potentially to be able to keep exploring down that ramp. Because if maybe it's too tough to raise at this point, or it's too early, if that just means you bounce off and go and take a job and continue your career elsewhere, that is game over for you as a founder, effectively. If you're not playing the game, you're absolutely not going to be able to progress. And I think that can sometimes just the general kind of media or conversation orientate this around, it has to be a product now, and that's the only thing we can do. And I think that kind of doesn't really reflect actually the many huge companies today started in a very small and focused kind of way. And that kind of gets lost a little bit, I think, in the strategizing sometimes.
So IfWeRaise is growing slowly and organically. What makes you stick with it? What keeps you motivated? What are you excited for? What's next in your mind that gets you excited to keep coming in, even when I'm grumpy, to work with?
With multiple things, actually, I'm really passionate. I love building things, like collaborating, creating something out of nothing. Like that's, to me, that's the heart of kind of entrepreneurship. And I love that. Like, it's a privilege and a delight to be able to build and to collaborate and do those things, I think. And they're the heart of IfWeRaise for me, as well as the fact that we're giving other people that opportunity to do the same thing. I was lucky in my life to the circumstances around me just through birth meant I could see someone else being a founder and entrepreneur. I had access to the resources to do that. And the fact that there isn't fair access to entrepreneurship, whether that's through knowledge and network and certainly to capital, the heart of IfWeRaise, every time that someone says, "Oh, I loved that course," or "Thank you for that session," or something, it's helped me just move that little bit
Mm.
further towards it. That makes my day. That's enough.
Yeah.